Right, good morning everybody. Yesterday I recorded unpacking and initially setting up the Record Power WG200, the 8-inch version. Now, a couple of things that I did notice in the first video was that I mentioned the torque control as being the speed control. Of course it's not. The torque control is just applying pressure to the drive shaft, which I'll show you. The drive shaft, which is here, and that is pressing the motor shaft against this rubber-tired drive wheel, which in fact produces the whole power. Now obviously as this wears it will become compressed or may even be worn down slightly. You would need to adjust the torque. Also, if you found when you were applying pressure on the larger wheel, obviously you're putting quite a load on that because it's accentuated by the size, and you may need to adjust how tightly that is pressed against the drive shaft. But initially I think it would be wise to slacken it off as far as you can. A little lock nut there, and it's indicated plus and minus, so I'm turning to minus, and that is pretty well released it. It's not very tight, as you can see. It's still rubbing against the wheel, but I'll just tighten it a smidge until there is firm contact. I'm unable to easily, I could force it around, easily do that. And that I think is probably the best starting position. And then to tighten it, if I need to later on, once I've used the wheel and felt the real power that's going to be needed against here. But for the sake of not overstressing the motor and not wearing that too quickly, I think start with a lowish setting you can get away with, as it were, and then tighten if you need to. Remember, these lugs just center into the holes, so it's a case of just putting it onto the shaft. The little lock-on nut, just to secure that. Again, no need to over tighten it, but it's all in place now and ready to turn. The speed control is over here, and the speed control will be very much a question of use. You'll set the speed control probably again like the drive shaft to the lowest convenient and workable turning speed, and then to increase as necessary according to how much weight and pressure you're putting onto the drive stone. The maximum that it will turn, I think if I remember, is 250 RPM, and if you remember, the grading stone, the grinding stone is actually listed as being, just looking here, 240 RPM maximum. So you've got a range there that you're not going to over turn the motor because of the speed setting, so you can move from low to high on the actual wheel. So that's enough of the recaps. I did mention that before really setting it up and giving it a good try, I had spent some time on YouTube, and I discovered that so many people recommended setting the machine when you're going to be using water with it in a seed tray. So excuse me, just disappearing over here. And here it is, a seed tray from our local DIY store. That sits quite nicely in there, and I hope that doesn't no, I don't think that's going to interfere with anything that we're doing, but it's nice and deep, it is secure. So what I will probably do is look in the future to those securing nuts, but that's really quite a stable base, and I'm not going to be rocking it backwards and forwards. It's on a very secure top here. So the next steps are to obviously look at wetting the wheel. You've got to allow the wheel to take up water. So when you first put water to it, so I'm led to believe by all the YouTube videos, you've got to give time for the stone to absorb water, and it will take a lot of water out of the trough initially. So when you fill it, you will see the water disappearing quite quickly, and obviously you don't want to leave the trough with water in it when you've finished. That is quite an important point, because otherwise the water will continue to soak into the stone, and you will then have a patch across the lower part of the stone, which is going to be much, much heavier because it's got water in it, and the water will naturally gravitate back down through the porous stone, and you're going to have a very weighted, unstable turning wheel. So again, get it well soaked, so you're not obviously rushing against a dry stone, so you don't immediately put water in it and start immediately. The other thing you've got to do is you've got to condition the honing band. Now, I've seen one or two comments on other machine videos when they've been commissioning them and starting them. Some say it's not necessary, and others, certainly the record power recommendation is in the guidebook and on the videos, that you should in fact put some oil and soak oil into the band before applying any polishes or anything. Now, I'm used to seeing that on stropping bars and things when you apply carborundum powder to a oil-soaked leather strop pad to provide some cutting and polishing effect. But I've never really heard of it being used for metal polish. But I'm certainly going to try and follow the instructions. It's all very well saying, well, you know, I know better, but I don't, because I've never used this sort of machine before. So I'm going to follow their instructions, and I will dress the pad with some oil, and I will soak up the stone. So I'm just going to check that it actually works. And here, remember I said that a lot of people have mentioned that the start button is on the off side, and I suppose from a health and safety point of view, and I'm actually now rolling up my sleeves so that there's no loose cuff that can catch into the back of the stone, or I mean it's not turning at a vast speed, and there's no sharp blades, but you certainly didn't want to be trapped and pulled onto the stone. But you've got to reach over to the on-off, which is on the back, and there it is, rolling away. I have to confess, I did try that. I thought that would be the prize idiot of recording and nothing happening when I turned it on. So I was reasonably confident that that could happen. So I'm now going to just turn it off. I'll now turn it on again and use the speed control. Again, I have tried it, but let's see what the difference is. It's at its lowest setting, and I'm turning it up, and I think you can hear the motor change, and you can obviously see that it's turning. Now, I am noticing, and I'm pretty sure that it's just the way it's going to turn, is the shaft. There is a slight wobble in the wheel. I've checked that everything is tight, and I hope that isn't an inherent fault in it. Get it down and then off. I will just double check that everything is locked up, snugged up nice and tight, which it is, I'm sure. I don't want to over tighten. Now, if you remember, when I was unpacking, I showed you the tool for leveling the stone. Now, possibly because there is slight movement, which they recognize will come, they recommend that before you really get started in any sharpening phase, you use the tool to grade the stone. One of the things that they mention is that when you're grading, this bar and this stone have to be absolutely parallel. And while I looked yesterday and thought there was some slight beveling on the stone itself, that doesn't really matter, because what matters is that when you're grading it, when you're actually grinding that stone into shape, as it were, you're making it parallel to the bar, because the tools that you'll use, say the straight edge jig, which slides onto there. I haven't tightened these up, so they are going to sink in and out a little bit, which is not particularly good. When you put a straight edge in it to rest down onto the blade here, you want this tool to be absolutely parallel to the stone, and so it makes sense to actually grade it and make sure that it all fits appropriately. Now I'll take that out. If I was setting that up to use it, obviously you would lower the fine adjustment, make sure that that side was snugged down, and then adjust the final level there and then snug it up. That gives you quite a lot of micro adjustment, which I think is obviously going to be necessary. And the grading tool, you have a support which goes on the back here, which helps you with setting the angle. But before you do that, you need to put your tool on. Showing you there. And then you apply pressure like that. So you're getting a nice constant backwards and forwards motion when the time comes. I'm not going to worry too much about that at the moment, because we've got some other things that I want to get on with. Let's take that out. Now the other little bit of advice that I picked up on YouTube is filling the tray, and they suggested getting a really cheap but long-nosed filler, because obviously when you're filling it in, the worst thing, if you've got a jug or something like that, it's going to be difficult and you're going to end up splashing all over the place. So when it comes to topping up, because you will have to top up a lot when you start with, this is going to be a lot more convenient, and it's just stopping water going everywhere. Okay, I think that's enough for the time being. The next thing I'll get on with is dressing the stone, dressing the honing leather and starting to wet the stone. But before I do that, there's some other toys which I intend to fit on, and one of them is the shaped honing wheel. If you remember, I showed you in the pack that you can buy as a set extras for this, and the leather honing, shaped honing wheel for polishing and honing will also need dressing. So I'm going to fit that now, because obviously it's just as well that I do both the oiling and then the pasting at the same time. So I'll just get the other bits of kit together, and then I'll just show you me putting it on there.